this imposed curfew period and the fight against coronavirus. Now, in regards to this, allow me to bring into this conversation Otieno Namwaya. I had hinted on him earlier on. He's a senior Africa researcher at Human Rights Watch, joining us right here in studio. Now, Otieno, I think we've heard from the two cases we've just played earlier on. And one thing that stands out for me is the fact that the last case wasn't really able to report whatever he went through. And we've seen frustration along the judicial system. Now, for something that is touching on the police force, how many instances are usually reported? How many actually get to be reported and investigated later on?
Today, I think they should be reported quite easily because there is IPOA, that is Independent Policing Oversight Authority, which is supposed to be handling those cases. However, we have come across so many cases where police go out of their way to try and frustrate that process of investigation. For example, even if Ogero was to report that case to IPOA, IPOA will need an OB number, which is supposed to be recorded by police, to commence those investigations. And we have seen cases where, even during this COVID period, people have been beaten, either others have people who have relatives who have died, and they know it is the police. When they go to the police station to take the OB number, police refuse to take the statement. That's one way of frustrating the investigation. The second thing they normally do is, like what we have seen in Dandora, they go after the witnesses who can testify and either threaten. In some cases, we know witnesses have actually been killed. And the third is that they just refuse to cooperate. You know, the law, when IPOA was created, it was not meant to be to work alone. It was supposed to work in collaboration with the police, but the police refused to do their part. After somebody has been killed or beaten, the police are supposed to carry out preliminary investigations, and the commander of that particular station prepare a report which is then submitted to IPOA. But police don't do this.
All right. Now, in terms of where we are right now, let's just say police brutality outright is not only unlawful, but definitely counterproductive in this COVID-19 times as we fight the spread of the virus. Since that is out there, when we hear people actually saying tutaogopa corona ama tutaogopa polisi, this raises proper fundamental questions on this fight against COVID-19. Now, when we have an individual who was purportedly beaten before curfew hours at around 6:30 p.m., where does this leave Kenya? Are we looking at police state? Because this comes up over and over again. It's not your first time here, and we even had President Uhuru Kenyatta apologize on behalf of the police when whatever happened in Likoni actually occurred and caused public animosity.
Yeah, the key thing is that it is going on even after the president apologized. And that tells you what the police understand to be going on themselves. In other words, there's lack of political will. Beyond what we see publicly stated by politicians, there's lack of commitment to ensure that some of these things that police do are contained, and where they occur, those who are involved are taken care of, or they are held to account. So we are likely going to see this continue. The problem is actually not just police. It's more political, and the way we are administering or administrating our public issues. So if you look at the way the measures that have been taken to contain the spread of coronavirus are being implemented, it's quite chaotic. Starting from how the curfew is being implemented, it's more like Kenya has a civil unrest when it is not even the case. To how we are handling or managing our quarantine facilities and how we are making decisions to take people to those quarantine facilities is actually problematic. And unless something happens, I think the fight against coronavirus is going to backfire. People, for example, are likely to refuse. Like when we start mass testing, people might not be willing to come out to test willingly, because if you test and happen to be positive, you are likely going to be taken into forced quarantine. And you know the conditions in forced quarantine are not good, and people have to pay for themselves. And the quarantining is being used as a punishment, where we see even police arresting people who violate curfew or even not wearing masks and being taken to forced quarantine. So this is a very chaotic way of implementing the measures against coronavirus spread, which is likely to backfire.
All right, and it's proper to give credit where it's due. Definitely, it's not the whole police service that is actually tainted with instances of, beating up and such. But when we take a look at the progress in dealing with such cases that come up, we look at IPOA, the criticism they at times get is that they focus on cases that have been publicized while ignoring some of them. Let's look at the numbers we have right now. According to IPOA, how many deaths have been caused by men in uniform? As we speak right now, how many deaths have been caused by police officers ever since the curfew was implemented on March 27th?
The numbers are tricky. The numbers are tricky in the sense that, first of all, the environment under which we operate right now is very restrictive. There are travel restrictions, and therefore it is not possible to tell the full extent of the deaths or the violations. The only people who can be able to tell that are the police, who are not willing to divulge those figures. So the figures that we talk about, whether it is Human Rights Watch or Amnesty or Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, are figures that they have confirmed themselves. So it's quite tricky to say that those are the conclusive numbers. So Human Rights Watch, we found that 6 people had been killed. But it is erroneous to present this as the number of deaths, because these six people were only cases that we documented within the first 10 days of the curfew. The curfew is now almost 1 month and a half, so we don't know exactly how many people have been killed. And even then, the first 10 days, we actually dropped several cases because of one reason or the other. We could not exactly verify the extent to which it is linked to the police actions. But we do think there were legit cases. When we talk to other contacts, I think you saw the other day Independent Medical Legal Unit talking about 11 cases. But again, I would say that is not conclusive. We saw IPOA itself talking about 15 cases of deaths, out of which they were linking only 8 to police. But again, I would say that is not conclusive. IPOA's statistics were going up to, I think, around mid-April. We are now deep into May. So I think the figures could be much higher, and we might not know unless the police begin to open up.
Now for someone back at home, let's use the example of James Ogero from Nambale, who actually gave us his instance of police brutality. In terms of dispensation of justice, how sure can we be with what IPOA is doing? We know it's an oversight body, but how sure can we be in terms of dispensation of justice?
I think there is a general problem with access to justice in Kenya, and the justice system itself has challenges, and that begins from the point of investigation to prosecution. So at the point of investigation, in this case, is the IPOA should be investigating. They need cooperation from the police, who actually don't do their part. Instead, the police, as we know, play games with hide-and-seek games with IPOA. However, if you look at the number of cases that IPOA has handled this far, from 2013 when they seriously started working, they came into being in 2011, started constituting in 2012, but in reality they started only working in 2013. So those are like 7 years. If you look at the number of cases they have actually successfully prosecuted, there are only 6 cases. But if you look at the number of deaths that reports have been produced, people who have been killed by police, they're going into hundreds, thousands. So it's a question of how effective IPOA can actually investigate these cases. We have cases where IPOA has said they're going to follow up, they're going to investigate. some of them have ended up being just public statements, but there are some where they have followed. My understanding of how IPOA has been operating is that the really sensitive cases are pursued, especially where there is public outcry, to conclusion. But the really quiet cases where families complain but they don't talk to media, they don't do anything, nobody really knows them, most of those cases end up not being really investigated.
All right, now what message can we give someone back at home who might have gone through such an instance with police officers and would be willing to report, but is going through certain challenges, which we know might be there, especially when getting an OB or something like that?
I think one of the things they could do is to quickly get in touch with IPOA. I think it can be reached online. With or without their challenges, I think it is crucial that people begin to report these cases. Where police officers refuse to take the reports or provide OB numbers, I think it's also an offense. And such matters should also be reported. I think internal affairs unit within the police should be able to deal with such cases effectively without even having to go to IPOA. So people should not fear to report. If they face challenges and they know of human rights groups around the area, it's also possible that they should link up with the human rights groups. In particular, I think Kenya National Commission on Human Rights has a very wide mandate of dealing with some of these cases. And they even sit on the board of IPOA. So it is also where they are not reaching IPOA, I think it's also advisable for people to begin to call Kenya National Commission on Human Rights.
All right, now that's definitely hitting the nail on the head. Many thanks for your insights right here on News Center. That's Otieno Namwaya, who is a senior Africa researcher at Human Rights Watch, who took us through as we were taking a look at our top story, the betrayal of the uniform, various cases emerging in parts of the country due to police brutality and in terms of enforcing the curfew and this time's relieving. We'll definitely follow up on this story even as the Inspector General of Police has given his statement on this. We'll play it for you later on during the broadcast. Let's just review what we had asked you on our Twitter poll question in terms of, has Kenya National Police Service won your vote of confidence in the wake of COVID-19? Taking a look at some of your feedback right now, I can see Augusto Kaloki, who says, honestly, a lot more still needs to be done to maintain the friendship between Wananchi and the police service. Not yet clear at the moment. Just sampling one more. Jacob Abere says, really? No. Majority are like alligators. They don't follow up with rules of engagement. Just continue interacting with us on Twitter. Remember at KTN News KE, where we've asked you that particular question touching on the National Police Service. We'll definitely follow up on this story even as we take a break.